If you're on the path to financial independence, you know every dollar adds up. An extra $1,000 a year might not sound like much, but early in your FI journey, that kind of savings can seriously accelerate your timeline. And if you're already FI, trimming $1,000 in expenses lowers your FI number and helps your nest egg last longer. And in today's episode, we're going to find that extra $1,000. And the best part is, I'm not going to ask you to start a side hustle or cut your favorite purchases. Instead, we're talking about saving money by wasting less, specifically food waste. Yes, that's right. The average American throws over 200 pounds of food away a year. For a family of four, that's $3,200 straight into the trash can. Think wilted spinach, moldy bread, or your forgotten leftovers. Any of this sound familiar? Here's the good news though. With a little bit of planning and a few habit shifts, you can cut that food waste dramatically and keep more money in your pocket without sacrificing lifestyle. Today's guest, Bryan Suddith, took that challenge seriously. Over the last 5 years, he's tracked every bit of food that's ended up in his trash. And the total? Less than $100. And that's for a family of four, over 5 years. We'll share practical tips for meal planning, a framework for eating through your groceries, his favorite go-to food waste saving meal, which honestly really surprised me whenever I asked him it, and even how to avoid food waste after hosting a party. If you're ready to trim your grocery bill and stretch your $5 further without sacrificing anything, then you're going to like this episode. I hope you enjoy my conversation with the barbecue-loving storyteller, Bryan Suddith. Well, Bryan, let's get into it. You and your family took this huge big challenge on which was centered around tracking and reducing your food waste. But before we get into the details of that challenge, can you share one item that you threw away that still sticks with you as something you just hated to waste during that period?
Man, that's a great question. It's always some obscure condiment that really gets me. We love to cook. We love new foods. And so you go buy a special ingredient that's not part of the ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, standard.
Yep.
And we buy this thing and now we're stuck with 12 ounces of tahini or I don't know what, just something obscure that's not normally on our shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And we find ourselves struggling to find ways to use that. And then every now and then the jar just has to be flushed out and put in the bin. And that really gets us because I think it's almost constrained our ability to try new things. Because if we need 2 ounces of this and the bottle is 16 ounces, what's the plan for those 14 ounces remaining? And how often are we going to have this obscure dish in the coming weeks to use that? We spend too much time at the grocery store negotiating. Do we need this obscure thing in this large amount? I think the last time was $2 worth of cilantro. We needed a third of a bunch of cilantro.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have 2/3 of a bunch in a jar with water in my fridge. And we compromised by taking it, chopping it, and freezing it so we would not throw away that dollar's worth of cilantro. So then we had to leave these little frozen bags in our freezer of cilantro. Whenever we need them, we just pop them out of the freezer. But yeah, it just killed us.
How do you prevent the freezer waste buildup?
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept whenever I was prepping for this, and so much of the typical items that do get wasted, we're talking produce and vegetables, can be frozen. But I don't want to just take a frozen item or take an item that is going bad and move it to the freezer just to essentially delay the 6 months or 12 months that will eventually get to the trash can.
I think it's easy for that to be the case, that you're just delaying the inevitable by freezing it. Mm-hmm. And we've just had to rotate or to sort of insert into our schedule a review of the freezer like we do the pantry. That we just come back from vacation, so we had a big grocery store trip because we had really drawn down everything before leaving town for a week. And when we come back, we're restocking, and we started to sort of rotate stock in the freezer. Hey, remember we had this, and we had a plan for that. Let's move that to the front. Let's put it on the list. And so it really does take some intentionality to treat our freezer the way we do the pantry. Because or you'll end up with 6 pounds of overripe bananas just in the back of your freezer. And you're never going to get to that much banana bread ever. So
I don't know. That's a challenge that I'm willing to accept. I love banana bread.
Okay. No bananas will ever be lost.
Let's get into some of the details of the challenge now. What counts and what doesn't count as food waste? Because I'm assuming,
great question.
Taking an avocado core, would you count that as food waste in your challenge?
No, we count things. Simply things are edible. So we don't count discarded bones, even though we sort of save those and use those too, but our peels, and we save most peels. But cores, the end of carrots, an apple core, seeds, we don't count those things. And most of those things go to a compost bin, compost section of our back garden. But we don't count those things, the pit of an avocado or the pit of a mango. We don't count those things. If it's consumable by us and was meant for us to eat when we purchased it, and we do not eat it, and it leaves either in the disposal, the trash, which is very rare, or compost, that's what's counted. And we assign a dollar value to that amount of waste.
Well, let's talk through those specifics there then. So how do you actually track the food waste? Do you have something up on your fridge and manually do it? Do you have an app that you use?
Yeah. When we first started, it was simply an audible mental calculation. I threw away I remember the first day we started started accounting. We'd lived this way for years, but we started assigning a dollar value in the early days of COVID when we both were sent home to work in a home office together. And I was throwing away some leftover mac and cheese, which was we're pretty good about these things, but this one just got my attention. And I thought, how much money did this cost? We bought a box of pasta. I bought a block of cheese. I bought a bottle or a half gallon of milk, and I had some, other things invested in this process. What would that cost? So I broke it down. Like, this is 2 ounces of a boxed pasta. That box pasta cost me $2.50. This is a tenth of the box. That's 25 cents. There's at least an eighth of a pound of the cheese that I paid $4 for. So now I'm at 50 cents for the cheese. And I got to like $1.35 or $1.38 for that amount of mac and cheese that I just put in the trash. And I just yelled out to my wife in the other room, I just threw away $1.35 of mac and cheese. It's sort of a joke. And then a couple of days later, I dropped an egg. And I remember saying, and that's 25 cents more for that egg. And so then we just started keeping track. And that number, I was like $1.35 plus a quarter, that's $1.60. And then that number just sort of grew over the year. And by the time the end of that year came, we were shouting out numbers, and it was about $30 by the end of the year. Since then, we've gone to keeping a Post-it note on the fridge, and we've done a tracking log. We had a diary for a year where we tracked every expense and waste, just to get into the habit of the discipline of calling attention to the waste as a reminder. Now it's just a Post-it note. We keep track of those misses.
Was that the inspiration behind this? You just wanted to bring some intentionality, or were you going through a financial hardship and you were trying to save some money? What, I guess, led you to actually taking on this challenge?
I think, during COVID, people took up puzzles and baking. And for us, this was something we could work on. We were home a lot, so we started cooking more. We both were in offices in town, and now we're both home. So we're cooking more, and we're there together a lot. Our first kid had come out of college and launched on his own. We still had a kid in college. I just started college. So the money was always in the background. That wasn't the primary driver. It was sort of something we could work on together, and to see how much waste could we put a number to it, and then could we drive that number down? Mm-hmm. And how would it impact the way we eat? So I think the money part was probably secondary, but it was an added benefit that we could see how much money that we were leaving in our budget for either debt pay down, investments, or leisure and recreation. So we could identify it, but it was really a thing that we worked on together as a game almost. We tried puzzles, we tried baking, but this really stuck, and we're still working on it years later. So
I love it. Two type A's getting together for what they deem as a fun challenge.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept, and I think listeners are probably going to resonate in different capacities. Will be some that the idea of saving money, especially on a big category like groceries, is very enticing. And then there'll be some listeners that probably don't need to heavily save money, but they love the intentionality and sustainability of what this challenge brings. And I'm kind of like a little bit in both camps. Like, I love that there's added benefits on both, and sustainability is super important to me. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I was talking to my girlfriend about this early last week and, prepping for this conversation. And she's like, yeah, but we just don't really waste that much. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't know. Like, I do think that we're probably pretty conscious, and I'm a bit of a garbage disposal. So I go through most of our leftovers too. Yeah. But just over the last week, I went ahead and tracked my food waste, and I was surprised. So on my list over here, I bought a 3-pack of romaine, and one of the heads went bad. I lost a half a bag of spinach, 20% of a container of sour cream, 20% of garlic powder that the cap was open and it got hard and went bad. Sure. And then My girlfriend bought some like artisan dill cheese that got mold on it. And yeah, I know that one hurt me. Luckily, she ate most of it, but I calculated that all. I used my HEB prices on it, and it came out to $4.95 over a 5-day period, which honestly felt like a pretty light week for me. And there might be one or two things in my fridge that I delayed throwing away so that I didn't have to add it to that number. But extrapolating that number from a yearly cost, that's already $258. And once again, that felt like a pretty light week for me. I wouldn't be surprised if we're wasting $500 to $1,000 a year.
I've said to the folks, I hear those stories a lot, and I think that's the value of keeping track, of just tracking where that is and doing the experiment like you did. You're either confirm what you've believed, that you're pretty good at this, like you're well below the national average, or you're going to find out, wow, we are throwing a lot out. And once you become aware of it, then habits could almost organically change if you're aware of it. Like, shoot, I'm used to always buying a bag of spinach, but you know what, now I think about it, I will use it, and then half I'm always throwing away. Like people then begin to think about it. I would say if you're $5 a week, that's below the average, you're doing fantastic. And I try to, when folks ask me about this, I say, you should not aim for where we are. We are at the extreme edge of this. But awareness can bring some real understanding of what you're buying and will change habits just from the most basic of tracking like you've done.
Yeah.
Which is where we started.
Yeah, the intentionality immediately made me make some changes in my fridge and move some things to the freezer that I know I'm going to need a plan for next week. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's nice. And honestly, this is probably something that I probably want to do for like 1 to 3 months just to get a good baseline and understanding on it. It's kind of like budgeting too. Like some people are really good with their money and other people aren't, but I encourage most people to budget for 3 months just to get a good idea of what money's coming in, what money's going out, because there's always at least 1 or 2 surprises to people that you're like, oh man, actually I thought I spent $100 on eating out a month, but I actually spent $500 on eating out a month. Like I hear those stories all the time.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And in my day job, we teach some beginning finance for some of our clients, and same thing, like think you know what your income is, you think you know what your expenses are until you document it and compare it to actuals. And the same with food. We thought, how much can we be wasting? And you start documenting, you're like, wow, the documentation I think is so key to this. It just brings a new level of awareness to the situation. And then you can act. You can either be satisfied where you are, or it can give you the motivation to move the needle a little bit. So no wrong answers, by the way, on any of this.
Definitely. I said it in the intro, but just kind of recapping here too. So the number that you like to use is the average household waste about 30 to 32% of the food that they buy. And the average household is spending roughly $10,000 a year on food. And that's a household of 4. So we're looking at $3,000, $3,200 roughly that the average household is throwing away. That's a significant amount of money. How much did you do in your last 6 years, or maybe just the 5 years that you've been aggressively documenting?
Now it's just the 2 of us. We're spending around $3,600, $4,000 a year is all we're spending versus 2 of us. So we spend about $4,000 a year, and that our waste has been consistently less than $10 a year.
That's crazy.
So it's like less than a third of 1%. So it is a crazy number. And even to say it out loud after all these talks and interviews and sharing this with folks, it is a crazy thing to say out loud, but it's just come from just years of practice and a discipline on this topic and eating a lot of weird meals. Like I talked about it in the economy talk, and I've shared that with other folks on social media. I may be eating one thing at dinner, and my kids could be eating something totally different when they are home, and my wife could be eating a combination of the 2.
Yep.
And just really, she has no food rules. So she can really combine meals. Like we made a great broccoli salad over the weekend. I grilled out some foods, and this broccoli salad has some apples and stuff in it. It's really nice. Well, there were some leftovers. And so we had breakfast for dinner. It's a big Ohio thing here. And she had, I think, an omelet with this broccoli salad, which is a weird combination. It's almost brunchy.
Yeah.
But she was so committed to not letting that broccoli salad get soft and just not appealing that she would eat it with her omelet and toast. So we've given ourselves permission for some really weird meals to accommodate this goal that we've set for ourselves.
Yeah.
And other folks, your food rules or your diet may not permit that, but the awareness piece that you just talked about will allow you to create a plan to move where you want it to be. So.
Sure. Yeah. Some people might not like leftovers, eating leftovers in general. That means you might just need to dial back on how much that you cook at each meal, which is totally fine. Like,
Yeah, there's a couple strategies here, and that is one of them. Like, just reduce the amount of leftovers is a strategy. And I hear it a lot from folks like us who have just transitioned from a family to empty nesters. How do you adjust from feeding two 16-year-old, 18-year-old boys, men, to now it's just two adults? Like, that was a big swing, not feeding extra men in our house. So that was a learning curve. And then if you are going to have leftovers, what's your strategy to use those? So there's two ways to handle it, and we employ a little bit of both.
I mentioned that I'm a garbage disposal for leftovers, and my girlfriend's such a wild card eater too, just like your wife. She actually doesn't like breakfast, and I'm a Midwest boy, so I understand breakfast for dinner. We had that many of times, but she's not a fan of any kind of traditional breakfast. So oftentimes she's eating pasta at 10:30 in the morning that we cooked the night before, because that's what sounds good to her right now. So she's always a great wild card for me, and then I just kind of clean up behind her. And I think you gave, I can't remember the exact example at your economy talk, but it was like you made chips and guac prior to eating spaghetti that night. Like it just combining things like that, because you had a couple avocados that were going bad. So here we go.
we have done chips and guac with lasagna before. Yeah. And people are like, man, that's really something. I'm like, it's not, if you think about it, it's not bad. Like it sort of works, but you've only got, avocados, you've only got a couple days. And so it just, the timing worked out. We had meal planned for some pasta and avocados are ready to go. So, but you have to be pretty flexible.
So let's get into strategies around preventing food waste. You got a lot of great ideas here, and a lot of things that you've done over the last 6 years whenever you've been pretty intentional about this. I'm guessing a lot of food waste or preventing food waste starts at the grocery store. Do you have any tips for avoiding aspirational buys, the stuff that we grab with good intentions but never end up using?
It's just intentionality. Just like we would in our budgets or our investments, it's very intentional. And so before we grocery shop, we take an inventory of the freezer, the fridge, and the pantry, and know what's on hand and has to be used in the coming days or the coming week. So when we get to the store, we have a list of what we're looking for that's going to complement those items. That doesn't mean we don't buy the aspirational things, but if we can work it into the plan, the question always is, before we buy something, how long can it last in our home? And two, if there's a finite few days, if it's a fresh item or a baked item, what's the plan for it? So we have it in our mind at the store. If we're buying this thing that just looks so good, as we're normal people, we like these things too. What's the plan? So it doesn't just go in the cart and go home to the shelf hoping it gets used. Well, it's very intentional. So we'll take that inventory, we'll map out weeks or 10 days of meals, and then we'll shop to complement those items, so that little bit of sour cream that you lost this week, we would have hopefully caught that the week before and thought, how am I going to use that? What are we going to bring home that sour cream is going to match with, so we can get it out of that fridge before it gets unusable? So that's where I think that's the intentionality behind our shopping, and it's allowed us to stay pretty disciplined. There's always room for those special things we see, but our general shopping, 95% of the bulk of our purchases have a purpose in mind over the next week or 10 days.
I like that. And then I remember at your economy talk too, you talked about this framework for how you eat through your groceries. I think you were on like a 2-week window. Can you share, like, whenever groceries hit the fridge, how you work through the groceries?
Something happened earlier in our marriage. My wife was active duty Air Force, and she got paid twice a month. And so we grocery shop twice a month. And then as our relationship and finances have evolved over these almost 30 years, we still shop every 2 weeks. We're stocking the fridge mainly for a 2-week span. But things like you mentioned earlier, like you lost a third of the romaine. My wife loves those bag salads that have all the stuff inside, which so much trash. We're working through that. But she loves them, but they only have a couple days shelf life, where a fresh head of iceberg or romaine can sit whole for a few more days. So we sort of prioritize produce or fresh baked goods. So we sort of eat them in the time frame that they're going to expire. So when we buy that special bag salad with all the extra little things in it, we know that's going to be a Monday's dinner or Sunday's dinner pretty quick. And then as we begin to make salads with the carrots and onions and iceberg, we know that is going to last longer. Berries only have a few days in there, but an apple could take up residency in your fridge and it's still good at 5-6 weeks. We make jokes like carrots, they can be in that crisper for a long time and they will be fine, right? But an avocado, you've got a few days, or bananas a few days. As we stock, we just keep an eye on those things that have a short lifespan and incorporate them in the meal earlier. And the older we get, the more flexible we get, there's a mid-cycle trip to restock those fresh things that we really like. We just don't buy 4 pounds of strawberries because 4 pounds is a lot in 5 days, right? So we're only buying what we can reasonably consume. We say that bananas, we buy 5 bananas at a time because my wife, she likes bananas, but she's not going to eat 10 in 5 days and before they go bad. So we've changed the volume that we buy. And then there's that tension. A lot of things are cheaper in bulk. It may save money at the front end, but if you're throwing it away, are you negating that savings if you're not using it? So that tension's always there for us.
You've got me changing my tune on that a little bit as well, because I just came from a frugal household and we bought the gallon of milk because it was cheaper than buying 2 half gallons and all of that. But as I've put a little bit of intentionality behind my food waste over the last week, I started to recognize, even if I got to buy 1 romaine versus a 3-pack and I'm going to spend a little bit more, at the end of the day, I might not, because I'm ending up wasting some of it.
Sure.
But I'm okay spending a little bit of extra money if that means a portion of the bulk purchase I was got to make doesn't hit the landfill, doesn't hit my food waste or even my compost at that point in time.
Right. We dug into this pretty deep on the milk thing, because the same thing, we'd buy a gallon of milk. The kids, that could go in a couple of days. Just 2 of us, it could be there a while. We found out that a gallon of milk has like a basic 8-day shelf life, or maybe 10 days. But a half gallon of milk is actually longer a shelf life because it's actually homogenized or pasteurized at a different temperature. And the little tiny jugs, like the pints or quarts, last even longer because they're pasteurized at an even higher temperature, so they're safer longer. But the price goes up, right? The per ounce price increases at a smaller volume. So we've had that talk, like, it's cheaper to buy the gallon, but we're only going to use a half gallon. Do we pay that extra price knowing it's not going to be wasted? It has a shelf life that's a few more days longer. And we find that with other foods as well. And it's something that I think people have to make that decision. Can you find a use for it and the savings at the same time? Or is that investment up front to know that the producers of this commodity are not overproducing for me to throw it out? Like, we're trying to think of that whole supply chain of them producing the product, storing the product, shipping the product, stocking the product, me taking it home, the carry costs for me to hold it. We're trying to think that holistically about the whole process so that we know our impact is bigger than just our budget. Yeah. So that's a lot on that answer, but it's a tension that's always there for us that we've not perfected, but we're always keeping in mind.
I'm going to want to talk environmental impact because I'm really excited about it. We'll hold it for a few more minutes here because I got a few more preventing food waste questions for you. And the people that are looking for some tips, I think you're packed with them. What about like your favorite food waste saving meal? Do you have like a go-to, like a stir fry or something where you're like, oh man, I got things expiring and I can knock this all out in one meal?
Our house, the go-to is nachos. We always have tortillas on hand. And we have found that any cheese and any meat, any protein can go on nachos in the oven. And then basically almost any vegetable can go on top. Like we've really, any tomato, onion, any lettuce or any green and any dressing, you can really do some things with a sheet pan and some nachos. We've done some things, and which we love, but also the stir fry stuff. We find that if there's leftover rice, then anything is possible. And again, we don't have any rules. So any protein in a pan with rice with some leftover vegetables and some seasoning, like you're gonna have a winner.
Yep.
And those are the 2 biggest. But the nachos, I can't imagine any protein left over in our fridge that's not ever been on nachos. Like, I mean, fish and shellfish, pork, chicken, beef, it's all found its way to nachos in our house, and everybody loves it.
I was about to say, who doesn't love nachos?
Right. It just works. It just works.
So I like the food waste saving meals. We talked about freezing items as well, especially if you bring some intentionality behind how you're gonna work through those frozen goods.
Sure.
I'll name the top 5 most wasted food products. Any other ideas that come to mind, shoot them out for me. So
this is awesome. Yeah.
There's lettuce and spinach, there's fresh herbs, there's vegetables, berries, dairies, and bread. For the people that responded, this was most often what they were responding with in terms of the things they end up throwing away. Any of those jump out at you as some like other creative ideas outside of freezing or kind of these saving waste meals?
Any bread for us, any bread, roll, bun, any of those things, we'll make bread pudding out of. Especially if it's the fall or winter months, that all gets cubed, eggs and cream. We bake it, and it's no matter what bread it is, it'll work in bread pudding with enough sugar and butter and cream and some seasoning. We love that. We also will use the food processor, and we will chop any bread to breadcrumbs and toast them off and save them.
It's a great idea.
We don't buy a lot of breadcrumbs, so any leftover bread, same with chips, leftover pretzels in the bottom of the bag or not, those all get ground, and they're breadcrumbs later for something. In a mason jar, dry on a cabinet and a shelf, you're good to go on all bread. Lettuces and spinaches are tougher. That's just a tough one. And spinach will cook down and then freeze it and use it for soups or pasta or sauces later. Lettuces, that's tough because there's not a lot you can do with it. Yeah. And our palate, I know some great Asian dishes where you could cook a romaine or cook a stir fry some iceberg or something. We're not those people. It's not. We don't have anything there. Dairy's tough, especially around the cheeses, sour creams, things like that. We will just watch it, and then it gets shredded, and it'll be cooked pretty quick.
Yeah.
We have found milk. If we know that milk is only got a couple of days, then I will make a bechamel or a white sauce or a gravy that can hold in the fridge for a couple more days. So it just buys me a few days of time to incorporate that in with a pasta dish or a protein. We've used that a lot. We used to freeze dairy a long time ago and just
didn't work out.
Just didn't like the results of that. It's usually never great.
Yeah.
Berries, we just love fresh. When fresh fruit is ready in Ohio, it never makes it. I mean, it's gone. So that's something that we struggle with much here.
And smoothies are like
it's an easy go-to.
Yeah. You're like, all right, we'll just make a couple of smoothies at home if that's the case. And
it's going to get used.
Yeah, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, we freeze those, and we know probably next week we're throwing those into a smoothie.
And if they start to get soft, we'll also just put them in a saucepan real quick, a little honey or a little sugar, and then that just makes a dessert topping over a biscuit or something like that, or a piece of bread.
Oh, that's fun.
So especially if they're soft and you're not going to eat them whole at that point.
More like a jam or a jelly.
Yeah, you're going to cook them down pretty quick, and it makes an easy sauce. That's pretty popular in our house, too.
What about herbs? Do you grow your own herbs now? Because that seems like one that's like, why do they always give you so much in every bundle?
Yeah, and we don't grow herb. We have, and they overtook our gardens. We took them all out, and we give them away. We will freeze them. So when we buy a bunch of, whether cilantro or mint or something that we buy fresh from a market, what we don't use, we will freeze, and we'll just chop, portion them off, and freeze them, and then I can grab out of the freezer. Especially cilantro, mint. There's probably little Ziploc bags in my freezer right now that's just easy to drop into a stew or a fresh salsa. Because even though they're frozen, they get a little darker, they don't look as good, but once you mix them into things, the flavor is still there, and you don't notice the appearance as much. But yeah, we'll freeze those extras. That kills me.
Yeah, I'm really resisting to ask this, but I'm so interested in the mechanics of your freezer. Do you set up or organize your freezer a certain way in order to make these easily accessible and noticeable?
The door is for those small vegetable pieces that have the other thing too is like if I have an onion that gets pretty old, I'll clean it up quick and freeze it, and it'll go to a super stock. That thing is going to blend it later. Those are in the door. I make my own stock, so whenever we have protein bones left over, I will re-roast them. I make our own stock out of all the vegetable peels and vegetable trimmings. So anytime we're trimming onions, carrots, celery, any herb, those extras go in a big gallon Ziploc in the freezer that's just it's perpetually being added to. And then I'll make stock. So I freeze stock in gallon bags that are flat. So you'll see those in my top of my freezer just stocked. So I never buy stock, and we never buy breadcrumbs anymore because those things just incorporated in saving them. So yeah, proteins are divided in the freezer. There's vegetables in the door, so that when you're in there, it's always top of mind. One of the things that we've put into practice in our fridge is to never overstock. Because if you can't see what you have, that sour cream you lost is probably in the back.
It was.
And you didn't see it, so it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Well, if it's out of sight and out of mind, then you can't be intentional about using it. So our fridge is pretty open. You can see most everything. The freezer takes a little more work to keep it organized so we know what's there, and everything's dated so we know to get it out of there.
The stock is interesting. Have you started tackling some of the non-consumables then that are also end up getting wasted, or you're still kind of like letting that be? And I mean, you compost, which is great. Like at the end
Yeah.
of the day, if something can't be consumed, if you can at least get it to compost versus landfill, like that is a great win. But have you found a few other things that at first weren't consumable, but now you're like, you know what, I'm finding ways to use these things?
I do know that I'd felt pretty good about like after Thanksgiving dinner, taking all the extra turkey off and portioning it out. And that's going to be sandwiches. It's going to be for soups later and have it portioned off. But that carcass was still there. And I remember the first time I put the carcass or the leftover turkey, carcass is such a harsh word, the turkey into a stock pot with the leftover vegetables and made that stock. And as I picked through it, there was another pound of meat after I did the stock. So then the amount of bones and the amount that went to the trash, that volume just decreased even farther.
Yeah.
And the stock was amazing, better than I could buy in a box at our store. So we've not found a use for those bones out beyond re-roasting and cooking down for 12 or 15 hours, then picking again and getting every last bit of edible protein off that investment. You know, a 15-pound bird is a lot of money, and some farmer in Indiana put 12 weeks into growing that animal for us. So the least I could do is harvest every bit of it off so that energy and that time at that farm wasn't wasted. So I just feel like it's a responsibility almost.
I love that. And you did mention Thanksgiving. This, I think, is one area that my girlfriend Gabby and I struggle with is we tend to have a lot of food waste when we're hosting.
Sure.
How do you handle food waste during parties or big meals?
Yeah, that's tough because we like to host too. And our boys now don't live in our house. So when they come in, we want to spoil them and do these spreads. We invested in reusable to-go containers and we will send them home.
Good idea.
What will you eat for lunch? And we'll ask them, how will you eat this for dinner or do you want this for lunch? And then we'll put it in the container for how they plan to use it. So if he says, yeah, I'll eat that mac and cheese and that turkey for lunch, then I will send them home with 4 containers that are ready for lunch. They need to only just take it to work, warm it up, and it's a lunch portion. If they say, oh yeah, we would do that for dinner in our I have a son who lives with some guys and my other son just with his girlfriend partner, I'll package it for how they're going to use it and send it home with them and trust that they are going to use it. And that reduces sort of our end a little bit. And same with dinner parties. We hosted a few families a couple weeks ago. Same thing. If you liked it, let me send some home with you.
Yeah.
Will you use it? And ask them a question.
Yeah.
And how are you going to use it? Let's package it up for you to take with you. So that took some investment, and then it's hard to get our kids to bring those dishes back, but they're doing it, and we'll restock them. But it takes it off of us, so we're not eating that entree for the next 4 nights, but it takes a burden off of them, and we know it's going to be used. That's been how we've tackled it so far, is just prepare to send it home with guests so it's not languishing in our house.
Yeah, that's it.
And trust that they're going to use it.
Definitely. That's a good idea. I love the intentionality behind the container that you're sending them with too. I think that makes things even easier on the guest. And as someone that loves to get food from grandma and dad too, I make sure to bring those containers back so that the cycle keeps rolling.
The cycle continues. Right.
Have you thought about donating any food or using food pantries or community fridges at all?
I don't know that we have the volume that would impact them, so we've not done that. I think we've just done so well of dialing back how we purchase and how much stock we keep.
Yeah.
And we're active volunteers in some food pantries. It's not where we have that stock in our house that we need to clear and get to somebody else. We just have reduced the amount that we're holding. I mean, I think we probably have enough food in our house now we could probably go 2 or 3 weeks without shopping. We'd be fine. But outside of 3 weeks, we'd probably need to hit the store.
Yeah.
Where I know folks in the past have stocked. You may look in your pantry, you may have enough for 4 or 5 weeks. We've just been intentional about drawing that, how much we're carrying in the house, so that the ability to waste it or let it get old just is reduced.
I have months and months of food for sure, especially if you consider pantry and freezer, because my in-laws are big canners. They're also farmers too. So I'm always getting 20 pounds of ground beef at one time, or 15 jars of applesauce, which I love. But I do at times get a little overwhelmed, and I want to make sure there's still a process that I'm working through that. And like 5 years from now, I'm not going into my pantry and it's still sitting there. Like that's not the goal of what this is all about.
And we've struggled with that. We have some friends that live outside the city and are raising cattle and are raising pork. And like, do we want to start to be the people that buy a half of an animal and have a deep freeze? Are we ready to make that commitment for the cost savings and the efficiency of how they farm and how they raise these proteins? We've not done that yet because it would be a shift in how we operate, but I could see us moving that direction. We're not the type that's ever going to can, and I wish I had a grandmother or a father that was canning our life. We don't have that, but I could see that struggle. But even then, I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's just having a plan and being aware of that stock and then rotating it in. But 15 jars of applesauce are great, but is that 15 month of a shelf life? So probably maybe more if it's done really well. There's no right or wrong way. It's just understanding some intentionality to it and just having a plan.
Yeah.
And that can accommodate for almost anybody. And I talked on another pod last month that how easily this adapts to whatever your food requirements are. If you're really organic, hand-raised proteins or whatever, or something really niche, this also works. That intentionality of planning and to use these items works, whether it's organic or you're keto, or it's really important that you're at farmers markets and not at H-E-B or Kroger or Publix, that all the economies of scale and the planning all works the same. If you're spending this amount at the farmer's market, but you're still wasting a third, that's not helping the farmer. That he put time into that for you to consume. So however you are bringing food into your home, however you're storing food, this basic idea of knowing what's available, how you're going to use it, making a plan for it, will organically help you to reduce the waste of wherever it's coming from.
And I think that's super important. And of course, in this conversation was teed up as a way to save money. I mean, we're talking $750 to $800 per person in the household a year that you can save through some intentionality behind food waste. And I also am guessing that that's probably spilling over into other areas of your life too. Like I'm guessing just your food grocery bill in general has decreased because you've been way more intentional about it. Not even just decreasing the amount of waste, but decreasing the amount of food that you buy. And then all of a sudden, you're starting to think about that with your clothing, and you're starting to think about that with tons of other things in the house. There's this interesting spillover effect, but I love the thought around the environmental impact, and you brought it up multiple times in this conversation. It's not just the food going into the landfill, which is actually incredibly bad for the landfill. I think I read a stat, it's like 24% of things in the landfill are food waste. And the problem with food waste in landfills, with landfills being sealed, is it produces methane, not CO2, which is way more harmful for the environment. It blows holes through the ozone and does some detriment. But it's not just that waste and the impact that waste is making, but also the fuel that's lost, the water that's lost, the labor that's lost, the transportation that's lost throughout the entire process, from growing to harvesting, to transportation, to even you driving to the grocery store and buying it yourself. Like there are a lot of components in this process. It's not just 25 cents of sour cream, but all the other aspects that are lost throughout that process.
Yeah. I mean, it gets to be overwhelming to think if we're all wasting 25% of sour cream, that goes back to these farmers. Most are still family farmers with cows in a dairy farm. If 25% of everything they produce is just wasted, that's 25% of their efforts for naught, right? And we're all absorbing that cost. It's a cost to him, it's a cost to transportation, it's a cost to us. But to your point, it has spilled over to other things in our life. Like we are very aware of our electricity usage, gas usage, water usage. It really brings attention to all those things that we're consuming that have a production cost, and not just monetarily, but an impact on how we live and how the environment is around us. It's an unattended I don't think we intentionally sought that out, but we became hyper aware of it through this process.
Have you gotten into any of the food legislation at all either? Like one thing that really surprised me when I was researching this was they've been trying for years now to pass a bill to simplify best buy dates on food. And we all know what we're talking about here. Like you're looking at that milk and it says, best buy whatever day. And then you're looking at something else and it says used by. There's like, I don't know, something crazy, like 15 different terms that different producers use. And some of those terms are like, it will spoil by this date. But other terms are like, it will just taste best if used by this date. And there's a lot of consumer confusion because of that. Even something like dairy. Most of dairy is wasted because there's a big date on the thing and people see that date and it's one day after and they're going to dump it no matter what, if it smells bad or not.
We've not gotten involved in that, but I know that there's continuing talk on that option, on that area. I have a marketing background. I know most of those things are marketing ploys, right? If we can get you to throw that out, then you'll buy more. So
Yeah,
the companies aren't motivated for that to be used. They're motivated to have you purchase more often. So we have dug into those dates, and we're famous for, I see the milk date, I will pour it into a cup, taste it. I'm like, oh, this is fine.
Yeah.
We're going to cook with this tonight, or we're going to have cereal, or we're going to use it. But those dates are meant to confuse us, and it does take a lot of effort on the part of the consumer to understand that date on the pasta is arbitrary at best. It's dried pasta in a temperature-controlled pantry. You're good for a long time. Fresh pasta, a little different from your farmer's market, of course. But that dried pasta, dried rice, those are shelf-stable forever. I think it just takes more work on our part to understand those dates and know that canned goods are going to be safe for a long time after the date, boxed goods and milk as well. We've done a lot of research on the same thing and learned, like you said, there's a dozen or 15 terms that the manufacturers are using. And it's not helping give clarity. We know legislators, but I don't know that in our state, Ohio, that's a priority. We have some other problems we need to tackle that are pretty big these days.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, Bryan, as we're wrapping up this conversation, I'm sure you get asked all the time, like, how can I get started on this? What's one piece of advice that you always share with someone to help them get started on reducing their own food waste?
I'd say the first thing I would say is every time you're at the trash can throwing food away for the next 10 days, just in your mind, do some basic math on that. And you'll be surprised at the number pretty quick. And if you're not surprised, then you're probably doing okay. But I would say just do that. Like if you need to leave a Post-it note by your trash can or on the fridge, just for 10 days, just when you throw something away, think that was a half gallon of milk. I paid $3 for it. It's $1.50. As you're dumping it down the drain and putting the jug into the recycling bin, just jot that number down and look at it after 10 days. Like just even 5 days for you, you're like, wow, that's $5. Do it for 10 days. And you'll find yourself thinking about it a little more often. You'll look at your meal a little different. And at the end of the meal, you'll think, how am I going to store these leftovers? Or what would I do different next time? And it doesn't take a lot of effort. Just that awareness piece will really begin to move the needle in your household. And it will spill over, into other things.
That's awesome. Bryan, there's probably got to be some people that want to reach out to you, want to start a conversation with you, want to see how you've documented your journey throughout. You have an Instagram account out there. Do you mind sharing it and guiding people to it?
The best Instagram is coming to mind. It's at Bryan Suddith, with Bryan Suddith. And I'll have a link there to our old food waste account where we documented some of these crazy meals and crazy recipes and some things that we did along the way that helped us sort of get into the habit. That'll be linked on my Instagram page too, so people can find it pretty easy. But feel free to reach out there. I'd love to have the conversation, encourage folks to get started on this. I think you may not enjoy it as much as we enjoy it, but it is, I understand we're the outlier, but I think once you take notice of it, you'll begin to see your spending and consuming in a little different way, even outside of food.
Yeah.
So, which could be a whole other conversation.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I'm someone, A, that hates wasting money in any capacity, so this always gets me excited. But B, sometimes I feel so like I can't control things because they're so much larger than I am. And something like your own individual food waste is a way for you to make an impact on sustainability and the environment in a way that's very tangible for you. So this has got me super excited. I'm so blown away by how much work you and your wife and your family have done over the last 6 years around this. And I was so excited to talk to you about this. So thanks again for coming on, Bryan.
Man, I appreciate you having me on it and letting me tell the story to a bigger audience. So this is really fun for me and I appreciate the time.
I've been so fired up about reducing my food waste after chatting with Bryan. It's such a practical way to make an impact, not just on your budget, but also the environment. And my favorite part is you don't have to give anything up. You just have to be a little bit more intentional about when you go grocery shop and planning the meals that you eat each week. My favorite tip was his nacho meal recommendation. I was honestly not expecting it, but I think is absolutely genius. That's because, honestly, who doesn't love nachos? And they're also super versatile with the toppings. Like we talked about the tomatoes and the sour cream and the lettuce, all culprits of potential food waste, things that typically go bad. So I'm going to start using this nacho tip that he gave me. Overall, I think reducing food waste is one of the most FI-aligned habits out there. As a community, we pride ourselves in being intentional with our money and our purchases, and I think this just fits right in. Now, I'm not sure if I'll ever really get to Bryan's level. What he and his family have done over the last 5 years is seriously so impressive. I honestly didn't even think Gabby and I wasted that much food. but tracking it over the last few weeks has been really eye-opening, and I really want to keep working at this. So I'm going to throw it back your way and challenge you to do the same. Track your food waste this week and send me a list of what you wasted and your estimated cost. My email is justin@fiminded.com. That's justin@fiminded.com. I'd love to hear what you wasted, and maybe we can swap notes and kind of figure out how we can avoid waste in the future. All right, I got another fun episode for you next week, so I'm looking forward to you tuning into that. And until then, happy Fi.